See. Hello and welcome to Curzon Living Room, a season of live Q&A events on Curzon Home Cinema. My name is Stefan Pape, a film critic and interviewer, and someone who usually gets quite nervous hosting Q&As, but it's a lot easier when I can't see all of you staring back at me, so this should be a doddle, hopefully. Today, I'm in conversation about Next Door with director and star, the wonderful Daniel Brühl. Thank you so much for joining us today, Daniel. And if you are watching us live, we're taking your questions via comments on YouTube, and I'll hope to ask them as we go along. So Daniel, I'm going to start by saying congratulations on the movie. If you could just start by telling us a little bit about how this project came to be and the origin of your working relationship with writer Daniel Kelman.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. It's a pleasure that I'm joining you guys. The idea for this film was born 10 years ago, and it happened in Spain, actually, in Barcelona, in a tapas bar, where a big guy was staring at me in that restaurant, and I could immediately tell that he profoundly disliked me. The way I was sitting there with my little suitcase and my coat and speaking in Spanish to the waiters, because I just moved to Barcelona. This is my second hometown. I was born there, and I finally had my own place, and I was not living with my parents anymore. So I was very proud of that, and I wanted to show everyone that now I am from Barcelona. Looking at me from the outside, how I acted back then must have been pretty ridiculous, because I was, chatting with everyone, about the football club, and, just trying to be so friendly and so forth. And so, and then in this second that this guy was looking at me, the idea came to my mind that I wanted to do a film, a Kammerspiel set in one place with two men who couldn't be more different. And I imagined that this guy could work on the facade of the house that I just moved into, a scaffolder, observing my apartment for a couple of months, finding out many things about me, and then waiting for me one day in this tapas bar and confronting me. So a duel would start between those two, and the subject matters would be gentrification, social inequality, and the guy would just ask me all these painful questions, and then step by step, destroy me. So then I quickly realized I cannot write. I'm an awful writer. The things that I had written down were shit. And secondly, I didn't have the structure to do that film in Spain. So I forgot about it. And then 10 years later, when I was, thinking about it again, and living in Berlin again, I thought like, hold on a second. It would be much stronger and much more personal if I would tell this story in Berlin, between neighbors, adding that clash between the East and the West. Still, I couldn't write it, not in German either. So I approached Daniel Kelman, who's a wonderful writer and playwright, and just asked him if he was interested. He's a very clever guy. I was sure that he would tell me what a lousy idea. This is not for me. But surprisingly, he very quickly engaged and wrote a wonderful first draft that I got a month later, and then it took off.
Sounds like quite a profound trip to a tapas restaurant. I think that initial one. But how did you balance the directing with the acting? I mean, you were in almost every single shot, I think. Do you have to just get the trustworthy opinion of a colleague sat behind the monitor?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd been dreaming of directing for a long, long time. And I was just thinking what could be the first feature it should be. Everybody told me, all the directors that I worked with and actors who have become directors said it has to be something very personal. So in that case, I thought, I felt so safe because I was playing around with my own persona. I thought this is a story that matters to me because I'm dealing with topics that I have experienced. Gentrification, the changes in the city that I've been living in Berlin these last 20 years. The big differences that that still exist between the East and the West, and also the world, that superficial world of mine, of an actor, felt very close to me. So that gave me a lot of comfort. Of course, there were actors who told me, hey, if you want to direct something, great, but don't star in it. So I thought yeah, and I totally got why, because it's such a tough job to direct something. So you don't want to have that conflict of having these, the double function. But I have to say that to me, it helped me to always understand where I am in the story. It actually gave me safety and it helped. So thanks to the brilliant writing of Daniel Kehlmann and the phenomenal acting of my partner, Peter Kurt, who plays Bruno, my neighbor, I was really absorbed by his acting. So while I was playing these scenes, I really forgot that I was directing the film. So I was in the scene, and to not break that up, I decided to shoot many takes back to back without interrupting the flow and the tension. And then eventually, after a couple of takes, I would go to the tent and then check how it is. And for my own acting, of course, I had the DOP and the assistant director, who were my closest allies, and they gave me the feedback to my acting, and I always accepted it with all honesty. It was just a wonderful process. Also to be absolutely clear about the things that I don't know as a first timer. So I was, asking the most silly questions. I didn't want to pretend that I know everything and that I'm the commander in chief, but many technical issues that I didn't know were explained to me. So it was a very democratic, a very nice vibe. My authority was not questioned, but as I was opened enough to to say, hey guys, explain this and that to me, because I really don't know.
We have a question from Lisa West, who wants to know what's the one thing about directing for the first time that completely took you by surprise? Did you learn anything kind of unexpected going into this, being new behind the camera?
How many decisions you have to take every day. This was just overwhelming, and you have to react very quickly. So another director, actually an English director that I'd worked with on Kingsman, Matthew Vaughn, had texted me before I started the film. He said, hey Daniel, one piece of advice: always take a decision, even if it's the wrong one. It's better to take a decision than not taking a decision. So I stick to that, and yeah, I was surprised of by how many people you are approached with all sorts of questions, including pandemic questions, which I couldn't possibly answer.
And I was wondering too, because obviously, as we've sort of touched upon, this is a very personal film for you, and a character that is kind of, similar and lives within the same world that you live in. Is it harder to play a role that is similar to yourself? I guess when making, say, like a superhero film, there's this process of becoming someone else, thanks to the costumes, the set. But here, this is so kind of meta. Did it make it almost even harder to perform?
Yeah, in the process of the writing, it was, because I always wanted to make clear that we are in a comedy, in a dark comedy. So I actually, when it came to actually do it and play this guy, I always had the impression that I play a part. It's not even the worst version of me. This guy is a real douchebag. He's horrible. So I wanted to make a clear statement that this was not a film about me really coping with my traumas of the past and how hard the life of an actor is, blah blah blah. It was just useful for me to play around with experiences that I had and with my persona, because I thought that this guy is a perfect target for someone like Bruno, for a neighbor from the East. You know, here in Berlin, and right now I am in my apartment in East Berlin, and I have neighbors in the house who are from the East. Whenever I talk on the phone and I have to speak in English, I immediately get uncomfortable, because it's almost like a statement where the Easterners think like, oh, Mr. Important, So it is, it is, of course, it has a lot to do with me. And then on the other hand, not at all, So, and that was a crucial point. Sometimes we had scenes in the first drafts that almost sounded too private, too personal, but in the wrong way, So I never wanted to lose the comical approach, the irony, the self-deprecation, and still I wanted to fool the audience with, of course, adding stuff that is real and happened, more or less. I mean, I make references to the projects that I made, etc. But I hope that the people understand that this is not me. But and even if they think so, that is okay too. That's part of the fun that I had with this.
Yeah, I mean, did it have a profound effect on you? So, I mean, it is about an actor looking inwards. Did it almost force you to do the same? Did you learn anything about yourself making this movie?
Yeah, well, of course, I wanted to be, with all the comedy involved, I wanted to be honest within that, and to deal with the incoherence that I felt for a long time since I moved away from Cologne, where I grew up. I was lucky to have a kind of success very early on. So when I was 20, because I was already working, I could afford moving to Berlin and renting an apartment in the hip neighborhood that everybody wanted to live in, whilst my friends in Cologne had 4 jobs to finance their studies, So I was in a very privileged position, and I never lost that. So always I thought that I'm part of the gentrification process. So I was totally aware of the imbalance and the social inequality, and even up until now I do in my own house. And I could see the changes in these last 2 decades in the city of Berlin, and how the neighborhoods have changed. And yet in Berlin, this process might have been slower than in London, for instance, or New York, so that up until now, there is still the coexistence between socially very different families and people living in one building. That might change in 5 years. I don't know if in 5 years from now or 10, I will still have neighbors from the East. So it is something that I'm very aware of. And I was brought up in a family where my siblings and I got an education from my parents with a very clear social and political conscience. So I do have that conscience, and yet I'm a privileged person. So that dilemma was something that always interested me and mattered to me, and that was my way of dealing with it.
We have a question from Andrea, which asks, which film genre would you like to act or direct in next? And just to add my own little bit to that question, I mean, obviously you're an actor who works on sort of big budget kind of Marvel productions and stuff. Do you reckon that's something you could ever see yourself being interested in directing one day too?
No, I could never do that. Absolutely not. No, that's why I wanted to do a 2-hander in a bar, because I knew I could deal with that. I wouldn't lift a weight that is too heavy. I could focus on what I had learned. I could focus on the acting. It was all very contained and limited. The next film I want to do, and actually I want to do it again with Daniel Kehlmann, would be a different genre. We are thinking of horror, because horror, or to be more precise, a ghost story with a bit of horror. I mean, not too gory, but yeah, set in this genre, more or less. I mean, it's still very early stage, so I don't want to say too much, but and I won't be in it, I promise. So
you could shoot a horror movie in the room you're in now. I think it looks quite a good setting.
Yeah. Berlin is so dark. I'm sorry. It's the best I can offer.
Yeah, I mean, we got a question as well from Desba Ashley, which is, if you have to remember one thing, something that every director should know to make their first film, what would it be?
Well, be sure that you know what you're talking about and what you want to tell. So again, this was a very precious advice that I got from books. They're very great books that you should read, that I read, like Sidney Lumet's Making Movies, for example. But also, it is very fruitful to talk to directors and to ask every question you might have, just learning from the ones who are real filmmakers, because I would never consider myself being a filmmaker. I just directed a film, hopefully another one, and maybe another one, if they let me, but just to be to get a lot of advice from the right people, and then try to make it as personal as possible.
I mean, different nations have different cinematic styles. Sometimes you might sit down to watch a French movie and you think this feels like a French movie, likewise Spain, likewise Germany, Italy. You have this kind of blend of nationalities. You're part Spanish, part German. You've worked frequently in the US and the UK. And I almost felt like Next Door was difficult to pin down to any nationality, which is a good thing. Do you think that that kind of blend of cultures you bring will benefit your work?
Yeah, it was an eclectic mix of inspiration that I got for this film. So you're right, and I also didn't want to copy something, and ultimately you don't reinvent a film or a genre. So you always would probably think of you're quoting this film or the other. In our case, films that obviously had inspired me because they're a Kammerspiel would be like Carnage from Polanski, My Dinner with Andre. Then another film that I absolutely loved was Force Majeure, the Swedish film. I just loved the tone and the incredible editing and filmmaking and acting. Then also we talked about the Coen brothers. I mean, the stakes were, as you can tell, very, very high. I do not think that I have accomplished that, but we wanted to think of the big masters. Especially with the DOP, we talked a lot about the Coen brothers, as in the tone, as in and visually, how to heighten something without making it too over the top and too artificial, to stay real in a way, but still give hints that you are in a comedy after all. So these are the films that I can think of, but there were many more. So yeah, and then the sense of humor also, a lot of the British series and films, because and also the choice to go for an Austrian writer was very important, because the sense of humor, this is something that is, as you know, tricky in Germany. We have a very particular sense of humor that I sometimes don't get as a German. So that sense for darkness and a painful kind of sense of humor is something that you would find in Austria, and which has similarities to the British sense of humor.
We have a question as well from Tame, which is, what advice do you have for any aspiring actors? Because I guess, you mentioned you started sort of so young. You've been doing this some time now, Daniel.
Yeah, 25 years. Well, you should try to lower all these voices in your head and all the exterior, the judgment, the constant judgment, and just try to really listen to yourself, and try to, you know, keep that compass in you, and always ask yourself what you really want to do, and that will help you, that even in situations of humiliation or disappointment, when you don't get a part, does not mean that you then immediately implode and falter and want to give up, but that you think, well, maybe that it wasn't then right for me, or it wasn't the right moment, and I will have to try and I don't know, work harder, and maybe the film wasn't for me. There must be a reason why, and then and to have the faith that eventually things will work out, because you have to be well harnessed and tough in a way, to have a long life in this profession, because there's a lot of, you know, you get attacked a lot, and you get disappointed a lot, so you have to recover from that, and don't give it too much importance. Just listen to yourself, and always follow your inner compass.
Another thing I'm sure a good bit of advice would be just to work with really talented people, and obviously that's a given here with Peter Kurth. And I loved it was a real kind of two-hander at times in this movie, and he was brilliant in the role. His character Bruno says of your character at one point that your life is like one big holiday. Is that ever something you encounter from people? Do you ever get frustrated with that misconception? And would you argue that it's a harder job than it seems?
Yeah, that's the other thing you hear, no? I mean, a lot of these things that are said to Daniel's character are things that I really heard from people, you know, and that are painful, because people are not aware of you know, what is what comes along with that job. So they see the pictures of you standing on a red carpet and holding a glass of champagne, and you know, and it seems such an easy job to stand in front of a camera, and if you don't if you fuck it up the first time, well, then you do it again, no, as he says. And that is not the case, obviously. With him, it was wonderful to work with, because he was our first choice for me and for Daniel. So it was great to really get the actor that you wanted to work with, and that you had written the part for. That made it very easy once we were rehearsing and working, because it was only fine-tuning. We didn't have any general discussion or argument on set. It was just it worked out very smoothly, you know. So very little advice from my side was necessary, and he was just brilliant. Yeah.
So how are you in real life with fan or critic kind of feedback, and how much more invested are you into other people's opinions for a film that you've directed? Have you got a different relationship with kind of reviews and what people are kind of making of the film that you've put out there?
Yeah, of course, you're very sensitive, because you're responsible for the whole thing. That's the reason why I wanted to make it, you know. I very often felt excluded from so many fascinating aspects of filmmaking when I was acting. So creatively, you can do as much as you possibly can as an actor. And that's a great creative process, or it can be. But I just wanted to experience the whole thing. I wanted to be the captain on the ship. I wanted to, well, ideally in that case, have the idea, to co-write it, or be present when the script is written, to execute it and decide how you're going to shoot it with the DOP and everybody else, to edit it, to mix it, you know, to do the whole journey. And then, of course, you're responsible for the whole thing. So there is no excuse in the interviews when somebody doesn't like the film that you can say, yeah, well, the director was like, or the script was so. So of course it hurts me a little bit. And I'm not like the character, that douchebag that we see in the film, who says like, oh, I don't give a shit about any. Of course, it is painful if people don't like it. But I also learned now, because there have been some, you know, critics who did not see it the way I would see that film. and you have to live with that. That's part of the game. And sometimes it's even more interesting if some people dislike it. Here in Germany, there were fun discussions that all of a sudden occurred. Also with my neighbors, and this is what interests me the most. How they see me all of a sudden. So that was the way I had some funny conversations in the courtyard, because then they were thinking, do you see us like, do you think we are like Brühl? I said, no, not at all. And I'm, by the way, not that idiot, that peacock who you see in the film. So that was fun.
And a relief for this interview as well. But I think we've probably got time just for one more question, which we're going to take from Sheila, who's watching. She asked, was there any improvising in the film?
Not that much, really. No, because no, the script was very precise, and it I didn't feel ready for too much improv. A good improvisation means also a lot of knowledge. It has to be, you have to be very confident as a filmmaker if you go into that field, which I have experienced as an actor, but I was always in the hands of, very experienced directors who could cope with that kind of freedom, but still controlling it. So this is always a very difficult process, because sometimes in improvisations, as you know, you can lose yourself, and then in the end, there's actually nothing there. Little moments like when I tried to wash my hands, that was always in the script, that the water is not running in the sink, but I didn't expect that thing to dry my hands with, that plastic box would do the funny thing that it does. And it looks like an effect and looks like something that we did on purpose, but it wasn't. These are wonderful little funny, awkward, magical moments that only happen once. And so we kept it. Other than that, no, not really, no.
Brilliant. Well, I really just hope we can look forward to seeing you direct again, because as a directorial debut, it was a really accomplished and really interesting project. But thank you so much to joining us today, and to our guest Daniel Brühl tonight. I mean, this is where obviously in real life there'd be a huge big round of applause, but it's online. I'm sure people are clapping at home. But Next Door is available now to stream on Curzon Home Cinema and is playing exclusively on the big screen at Curzon Bloomsbury. And if you enjoyed the film and this event, please tell your friends. And you can follow Curzon Cinemas on Twitter and Facebook if it's back up and running for all the latest event updates. And I've been Stefan Pape, your host tonight, and I'm now going to go and be Stefan Pape, my wife's chef, because I'm going to go and cook some dinner. But thank you so much for joining us, and goodbye. See you at the next one.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.